That's what he claims. We'll see how it goes. Take it away.
All right.
Thank you so much. Okay, that sounds a little loud. Okay, all right. Right. So I need to present. How do I get the projector?
It's not a projector. It's a little slider.
Okay, great. Thank you. So I titled this talk "Short or Long, Funny or Dark: The Relationship Between Form and Function in Prose," because these are topics that I've been really interested in for a while. As someone who floats between forms, I've done some 6-word stories, flash fiction, short stories, and I've been working away on a novel. I'm interested in different forms and different lengths, and I'm also always wondering what I'm actually trying to achieve in this form, and what is the difference between all these forms, right? Like, what am I actually trying to accomplish when I'm writing something that's only 6 words versus, obviously, a novel? And tone, I'm also someone who likes to try to write funny stuff, or at least something with humor. And I also, though, find myself drawn to dark work as well, or some stories that deal with, issues that are pretty serious and that are arresting dramatically. So I did kind of want to choose one of them and thought that would be good, but the more I thought about it, the more I was like, I'm actually really interested in both of these topics. So my goal today is to hopefully give you something to think about. That's why it's called a rumination in parts. I don't actually draw to hard conclusions, so I hope you're not too disappointed. But I will have an interactive activity at the end that I hope gets you to start to think more about why you write in the form that you write in, and what you're actually interested in when you're trying to do tone. So, like Aaron, I'm interested in kind of starting this off by getting back to the form. What are we trying to accomplish in this story? I'm not going to use Freitag's pyramid, but I am going to go back to those quotes that you've probably seen before. Let me see if I can get that a little bit clearer. Is that bigger?
Yes.
There we go. Okay, that's better. So, there's that John le Carré quote, "The cat sat on the mat is not a story. The cat sat on the other cat's mat is a story." All of a sudden, we have something that we're actually curious about. So this could be a funny story, right? I think we can all agree there's a possibility for humor about these 2 cats and this one mat, and who's going to get the mat, and how the hijinks that can ensue. But I also think that this is a dramatic story, right? Because obviously this could be a story that's a lot darker. Like there's only one mat. Maybe only one cat's going to survive. What's going to happen? And then I also think about the Kurt Vonnegut quote. So yeah, I changed the order. I should have done it last time because I do have a couple other Kurt Vonnegut things. But if you're familiar with this, it's quoted a lot. He talks about a story where a student wrote about a nun who got a piece of dental floss stuck between her lower left molars and who couldn't get it out all day long. The story dealt with issues a lot more important than dental floss, but what kept readers going was anxiety about when the dental floss would finally be removed. Nobody could read the story without fishing around in their mouth with a finger. So I think about that a lot too, like whatever I'm actually trying to do tonally, I want someone, with the finger in the mouth, like at the end, like wow, that to pick up on the other craft talks, right? I think a lot of emphasis is placed on capturing the reader's attention, making sure that there's something at stake by the end of the story. So my own kind of rough definition of a story that I'm going to use is that, we certainly have conflict, but I don't think that's enough, because I think that most stories, at least the ones I'm interested in, involve an effort to overcome an absurd situation, right? Which invariably is funny, dark, dramatic, or inspiring. So, shorter is better. I think about this a lot. I'm not a poet, but I have a lot of respect for poets because I'm always amazed at what they can accomplish in short forms. I mean, I've tried to write poetry, and one of them's kind of decent. But But at the end of the day, like that Faulkner quote is so interesting to me always, because it's like, God, like, is my novel just me not being able to write something more succinctly? Like, is there a way that I should actually be much more efficient and intentional with my time? Or do I really have as much to say in that space? I'm always really interested in that. Like, what am I actually doing with this space? And because we all know, I think, when we get into the revision process and we're editing, most of the time we are editing down, right? We're trying to find a way to get things much more concise and arresting, using those verbs correctly. So what is the function of what I'm trying to do with the topic? Again, you probably heard the Ezra Pound, the apparition of these faces in a crowd, petals on a wet black bow, that famous Imagist poem. It's just, that's it. Again, William Carlos Williams, so much depends upon a red wheelbarrow laced with rainwater beside the white chickens. And then the story that's really probably not Hemingway, but some people think it's Hemingway, For Sale, Lady Shoes, Never Worn. So what's interesting to me about these very short pieces, right, is like not just how each word is very intentional, the construction, and it's building toward a very specific point, but that that the writers felt that finished, like they were said, this is all I want to say about this, and I can move on. What about that? Like maybe Jack was talking with architecture, right? You have to have a really strong sense of what it is you're trying to achieve in your blueprint, and what do you want to not say as well as much as say. Okay, so now we're going to talk about, obviously, what we're doing when we're dealing with a bigger work. Again, the TC quote unquote isn't necessarily making a case that your novel's always better. But I do like this quote because it does make me feel like, well, if you're going to do a novel, like you're talking about the whole mouth, right? And all the interconnected pieces of the bridge work in the mouth. It's not just like a two-thing. Because if you're doing that with your novel, then you need to think a lot more about the form, right? Conversely, if you feel yourself doing all of these fillings, you're like, okay, well, like clearly there's something more going on here that needs to be addressed, needs to be connected. If it all comes across as just a series of drillings and fillings, like I want to talk about something bigger. And then just kind of as a funny, more practical note, I included this excerpt from this article with Amy Stuber, which I think is the reality that a lot of us face, right? Where you're publishing something, and if you're ever lucky enough, I haven't been lucky enough, but I've heard this many times, like the first question you're going to get from a literary agent is like, that was cool, where's your novel? Right? Or where's your book? Where's the bigger work? So from an industry standpoint, right, like everyone's always looking for the bigger work. They're looking for you to have more, whether it's a collection of a lot of stories, but the reality is, like, if you do want to get a book published, you're probably not going to be able to just have a bunch of little things. Okay, so, and then I just wanted to include some examples of longer pieces, and I'll read them, and I'm going to ask everyone how you felt about hearing this piece, what the length of it actually did with your understanding of the writing itself. So this is from Margaret Atwood's The Handmaid's Tale. She's too young. It's too late. We come apart. My arms are held, and the edges go dark, and nothing is left but a little window, a very little window, like the wrong end of a telescope, like the window on a Christmas card, an old one, night and ice outside, and within a candle, a shining tree, a family. I can hear the bells even, sleigh bells from the radio, old music. But through this window I can see, small but very clear, I can see her going away from me, through the trees which are already turning, red and yellow, holding out her arms to me, being carried away. Anyone want to comment on that longer sentence and what you felt in terms of the tone? Like, how do you think the length of that sentence and all those details impact your response. Each sentence is like a poem. All right, okay, so inner line pieces. Anyone else know?
Is that revelation of what you're seeing through this? Like what we first see is the closing in. Yeah. But then it's like what you actually see is getting clearer and clearer and clearer until we get to the one important part, which is being carried away.
Right, so the movement from a point of precision, getting clearer and clearer, it's a build-up, yes?
I see it as more of the shock and receding into the interiority, and then coming back out with the ending of that sentence. It's really a loop.
Right. Everyone hear that? Yeah, the loop being carried away. So if it was a shorter sentence, she's too young, it's too late, we come apart, holding out her arms to be carried away, I think we can all agree, that's not as dramatically developed, right? Like Margaret Atwood obviously knows what she's doing. She wants us to really, really care a lot about the end. So even though we're talking about something slightly differently here with the sentence structure versus the overall length, I do think this is a good example of, like if you're going to blow up a sentence, this is a great way to blow up a sentence.
And it slows down time.
Yeah.
Not only for her, but for us as the reader. It's not the same to read. She's too young, it's too late. They're taking her away from me. Than to actually make us slow down and with her.
Yeah, slowing down time. And then a little more of a comedic one. I don't know if anyone's read Skinny Dip by Carl Hiaasen. At the stroke of 11 on a cool April night, a woman named Joey Peroni went overboard from the luxury deck of the cruise liner MV Sun Duchess. Plunging toward the dark Atlantic, Joey was too dumbfounded to panic. I married an asshole, she thought, knifing headfirst into the waves. Evidently, only one of the other 2,049 passengers was aware of what had happened, and he wasn't telling anybody. Bastard, Joey thought. So I'm just really interested in this kind of sentence because I think we can agree that it has kind of a dramatic potential, and it's not it's a pretty dark subject to think about a husband throwing his wife overboard. But the construction of this, right? It's like the longer it goes on, the more absurd it gets. So the point, I think we're identifying very clearly with Joey Peroni, and we're just kind of like, what a bastard. This is a story about some revenge here, right? Yeah.
But it's also moving the story along fairly quickly while and what is happening, outside of the character, the action of the story, rather than the Handmaid's Tale inside the character stuff.
Yeah. Right, and so it's another question of time and pacing.
Yeah. It's in real time.
Yeah,
Right.
it's in real time. Yeah.
So then I just thought, maybe it'd be interesting to think a little bit about attention span. Obviously, this is not my field at all, but Dr. Gloria Mark has some interesting research about this. I haven't actually read attention span, but she talks about, a lot of people have an average of 47 seconds of engagement on the screen. But I think the reductivist approach is to say, oh, well, everyone's too distracted these days, and everyone has an Instagram mindset, therefore everything needs to be shorter and quicker and have more time. And that's not really what Dr. Mark is saying. She's actually just saying that you have different types of attentions, right? So yes, you do need to be cognizant of the fact that, fine, on average, there's 47 seconds of engagement on the screen. But what she's also saying is, you just need to understand the rhythms and the different types of attentions, right? Because people will certainly go with you, as we were just looking at, right? Over the course of a longer sentence or over the course of the character build-up, if they understand what's at stake. If they don't, right, then obviously you're going to lose their attention anyway. So that's just another thing maybe to think about. Whatever form you're in, you can also get pretty bored on a short poem or a short story of 6 words, right? It doesn't necessarily have to do with how long it is. All right, so this just cut off a little bit, but I don't know how worthwhile this is, but I was just looking at, according to the BBC, the top 100 stories of all time. I mean, they're all pretty long, and they tend to be novels, so that's kind of interesting. And then I thought we would look at tone in God Bless You, Mr. Rosewater, and the Bell Jar. Again, I'm going to read it out loud. Thank you. And maybe we can just think a little bit about what each writer is trying to accomplish with the sentences and words, the diction. Hello, babies. Welcome to Earth. It's hot in the summer and cold in the winter. It's round and wet. It's all good. It's round and wet and crowded. At the outside, babies, you've got about 100 years here. There's only one rule that I know of, babies. God damn it. You've got to be kind. All right? And then this is Sylvia Plath, the Bell Jar. It was a queer, sultry summer. The summer they electrocuted the Rosenbergs. And I didn't know what I was doing in New York. I'm stupid about executions. The idea of being electrocuted makes me sick. And that's all there was to read about in the papers. Google-eyed headlines staring up at me on every street corner and at the fusty, peanut-smelling mouth of every subway. Very different tones. What do you notice here in these two passages? What Vonnegut might be doing differently than Plath? Yes?
Well, Vonnegut's narrator is speaking in direct address, at least, and he names the person he's speaking to as babies,
Right.
or like the collective audience, which that does a lot for tone. I mean,
Right.
hidden that thought.
That's what I focus on a lot, that babies. The repetition of babies, I think, definitely makes it funny because you're just like, what is going on with this person? Yeah.
You know, it goes back to your last one, Kasper, but I think the idea that Yason and Skinny Dip, I think
Skinny Dip,
that writer in the diction of the names
Right.
is encouraging someone. If you have someone named Joey Perone
Yeah.
and you have a novel named Skinny Dip,
Right.
you're automatically expecting something great.
Right. Yeah, no, that's a great point. So that's a whole other thing maybe about title. Oops, jumping ahead. That whole idea of like, God bless you, Mr. Rosewater. I mean, that's, again, Vonnegut is preparing you for a lot of strangeness. And the Bell Jar, you know, is very personal, haunting, right? Isn't it? Like, to me, that phrase the narrator has about, I'm stupid about executions, really kind of makes me cringe, because it feels like this person is so blasé about a topic that's really serious and disturbing, and that disconnect between her engagement with something that's horrific, this horrific time in history, is alarming to me, and I'm already worried about what's going to happen. I'm just like, whoa, if you don't even get this, and you're kind of focusing on how hot it is while the Rosenbergs are being electrocuted, and then obviously there's that kind of the setting of the heat of the streets and the electrocution.
Yeah,
Really,
the complaint is, I can't read about anything else.
Yeah.
I'm not, like,
Right.
this is horrible.
right. So, but it's very effective, right?
Yeah.
I'm into this story, even though I know
Yeah.
terrible things are going to happen, most likely. So, this quote, I've talked to a few of you about this memoir I read that was really, really difficult subject, incredibly written. Things in Nature Merely Grow by Yi-Young Wu. And this is one of the quotes from it that I keep thinking about. Life is a comedy for those who think. Because I guess I think about how if you're writing humorous pieces, in some ways you're really writing about ideas, right? And you're writing about how everyone's going to respond to ideas, which I never thought about before. So, as part of that, I was going to play, have people seen The Shining as a comedy? Okay, I think probably a lot of people have.
It's Johnny.
But we played anyway. Okay.
Oh, wait.
Let me get it a little bit louder.
Use the mic. Yeah. But it's up. The speaker's on.
Meet Jack Torrance.
Oh.
Meet Jack Torrance. Now I've been writing project. He's a writer looking for inspiration. Whose ideas? Meet Danny. He's a kid looking for a dad. Jack just can't finish his book.
I know that sound dramatic, but there's no way to make it economical. Here's 5 miserable months.
But now, sometimes, what we need the most is just around the corner.
I'd do anything.
So I just love that as an example of how you can completely subvert a genre very easily, right? And it goes back to that adage. A lot of times tragedy becomes comedy. Tragedy plus time is comedy, right? So when you manipulate the time scheme, you can take something in a totally different place. So obviously, the other side of that is darker. So the other quote was, "Life is a tragedy for those who feel." So if you're writing something that's dark or really dramatic, you really have to be thinking a lot about making your readers feel things. So I know that obviously we're still always trying to make people feel things in writing, just like we always want people to think. It doesn't need to be mutually exclusive. But I think that's an interesting way of kind of getting a rough idea of how the two forms are different, right? And then, Aristotle, poetics, he talks a lot about how you're trying to create sympathy for your character, and you're supposed to fear for that character so that the audience has a catharsis by the end, right? That they experience something that's worthwhile, that takes them away. So, my example of this is Miss Doubtfire is a horror movie. I'm sorry, I think I'm helping. And I'm just thinking about how this is maybe, okay, I'll play it. And then we'll talk.
Hello? Hello? I'm providing regards to the ad I read in the paper. For the past 15 years, I've been working for a smart family that never go in. Would you want to come on an interview, say, Monday night at 7:30? Oh, I'd love to. Well, I look forward to it. Ta-ta.
Online. Not do anything to do that. It's not to do anything. I just want to be with you. I need that. Because it gets me from you.
It must be that chair. It's not Mommy's time.
Your luggage. Your luggage.
My name's Sunny.
So good.
Again, I just think it's so interesting how you can subvert these forms, and again, this is sort of my rough definition. when things get dark and dramatic, it's taking an absurd situation, presented as more confusing. Whoops. Okay. Something that's maybe more confusing and unsettling in its presentation. Okay, so just a couple more things, and then we're going to do this activity. God, that's a horror story. Yes. Thank you. Okay, so final things. Again, it's just this idea of, should we consider tone? The Guardian references best short stories. I mean, these are pretty different tones. Now, there's not a lot of comedy here, but all of these stories, if you've read them, deal with the dramatic situation differently. So that's kind of interesting. So the final thoughts are, I think that if you're going to go dark, this is what Willie said at one of his talks that I thought was really interesting. The more light that you let in, the darker it can get. The more hope, the more things kind of are working out, it's going to be that much more devastating for your audience. But it's a balance, right? That's really about making people feel. Steve Harvey talks about comedy being the most sensitive profession on there. And I think maybe to some extent that's true. Like, when you try to be really funny, it's usually not funny. So you have to think carefully about what ideas you want to lead people with. I'll just read a little bit of the George Saunders interview, because I thought it was really interesting. I think of him as more of a kind of comedic writer, or someone who's interested in having a lot of humor in his stories, but he actually talks here about being inclined to the dark. He said, I attribute this to a tendency to think of life as fundamentally fucked up or flawed and problematic, to think of virtue as that which works to counteract the fucked upness of things. But then he goes on to say, I found early on that given my limited talent, one way I could reliably make drama was to manufacture some hardship for my character. In sometimes exaggerating that state, no sunlit days at all, ever, the whole thing tips over into the comic, and in the process, the meaning seems to sharpen. So we're just going to do a short activity to close things up. I want you to reflect. What kind of writer are you? And when I pose the question, I don't want you to think a lot about it. Just like what comes naturally to you right away. You can write it down. You just hold on to the thought. Okay? What kind of writer are you? What do you prefer? Short? Long? Okay? And then the follow-up is going to be, what do you want to do? Funny, dark, dramatic? Okay. So now what I'd love is if you could find a partner and just have a short discussion about why do you think that's the case? Are your reading tendencies the same or different in the stories you tell? To what extent does your personality reflect your writing? So you talk about all three, one of them, very, very briefly, then we'll share out.
Yeah.
I don't think my post, but I feel I would write any.
Yeah. Do you think that what you write, or like the stories I've read and the story concepts that you shared with me are aligned with I don't really write poetry.
Is that weird?
No. Yes. No.
Because I do read a lot of literature. I do read a lot of comic books.
Yeah, I do read a lot of poetry.
So I don't think I look right now I'm kind of obsessed about this thing. So that's what I'm gravitating towards.
Yeah.
But I was kind of like, I think kind of like, I feel it and like,
I think more on the shorter side than long, but I don't know if I can sustain pages, just like some bandwidth necessary by the end. But I can do like long short stories. I know like 30 pages is something I can like mentally, you know, and then. But I also like wrote a ton of like flash fiction over the summer, so. And then I love like funny, like dark, but on like a kind of like with a cartoonish twist, so it's not so like for her. Less.
I think I'm going to officially end it there. Thanks so much. Keep the conversation going. Really appreciate it. Yes.
So you talked about how with your quotes, if you want comedy is for people to think, and what was the other one? Tragedy is
Yeah, for those who feel.
What about dark comedy?
Right. So that I mean, yeah. So I guess what I was trying to set up at the beginning is like, you know, they don't need to be mutually exclusive, right?
Yeah.
And I think that, yeah, like I love dark comedy probably because it challenges both things. So yeah, and obviously everything that seems to be promoted now is cross-genre hybrid. But I think maybe you can appreciate, as long as you appreciate like when you're going to be dark, what are you actually trying to do, versus when you're trying to be funny, what do you want to accomplish there?